You know guys, the more that time goes by, the more that I get worried about the roster size for MARVEL Tōkon at launch, because we have not gotten any new character announcements for the game. It is supposed to come out next year, and you know, the devs of Tōkon have been in such big events and still they have not shown anything. So I started thinking, you know, maybe this game is gonna have a relatively small roster and we're just gonna have to deal with it. So I made a list of what I would argue are the essential Marvel characters for a small roster, you know, if Tōkon ends up having around like 22 to 24 characters. So let's get into the discussion of those essential picks for the MARVEL Tōkon base roster. And let's of course start the list with a character that everybody wants in, and it has to make it or the game could be a flop, not gonna lie, and that is Wolverine. I think that everyone wants to see Wolverine in Tōkon, and you know, the lack of Wolverine and other X-Men was one of the big reasons as to why Marvel vs. Capcom Infinite was a big, you know, disappointment for the MVC community and for, you know, anyone that likes Marvel characters in general. Like Wolverine is kind of already the brand of Marvel in, you know, connection with other characters like Spider-Man, for example. And I would argue that if Wolverine is not in the base roster for Tōkon, it could literally be a reason for huge amounts of people to just not buy the game at all. So Wolverine has to make it. It needs to be in. Okay, so let's keep the X-Men thing because why not? And I think that the other character that needs to make it from the X-Men is Cyclops. You know, Cyclops was not on Ultimate Marvel 3. He was also not on Marvel vs. Capcom Infinite. And Cyclops is one of the faces of the X-Men, you know, one of the main characters of the series as comics, in the movies also, in, you know, the animated series. So it just makes sense for Cyclops to actually make a comeback and also see what ArcSys could make around Cyclops in terms of gameplay that is different from what Marvel vs. Capcom did. So I really believe that Cyclops also has to make it into the base roster, and I would also love to see Gambit, but I gotta say that, you know, if the roster is gonna be small and you put Cyclops in, you're kind of not putting Gambit, I would say, and you kind of, you know, move him into DLC. But you know, I do want to see both of the characters, Gambit and Cyclops, and I love Gambit. Is one of my favorite X-Men of all time. But sadly, I do think that if the roster is gonna be small, you know, and you need those iconic characters, Cyclops is kind of in that list, dude. So Cyclops should probably be in the base roster for Tōkon. And then I have another two faces from the X-Men, the female representatives, and of course Storm. It's already in the game and she's arguably the most famous female X-Men ever, but we probably gotta add a couple more. And the ones that I choose are Psylocke and Rogue, and I think that just Psylocke and Rogue make for really interesting characters gameplay wise. Like with Psylocke, you can have your sword user stance character, and you could also maybe replace her with someone like Magic, but I think that Psylocke is a much more famous character than Magic by this point. And then with Rogue, you also have a very unique character, you know, like that energy absorption archetype that could also be stealing powers from the moveset of the other character, maybe their supers or some special moves. And I just think that both Psylocke and Rogue make a ton of sense for the game as more female faces for the X-Men. I would also love to see other ones, like for example Emma or maybe also Mystique, but I think that just Psylocke and Rogue make more sense, are probably a little more safe, and they just kind of like deserve a spot in the game. And taking into account that both of these characters are not or have not been on a fighting game in a while, they're actually like a safe bet for ArcSys to try and put in the game. So I think that, you know, Psylocke and Rogue make a ton of sense for Tōkon in the base roster. If you have been enjoying this video until now and you don't want to lose in any future content around MARVEL Tōkon or many other fighting games that I cover, please consider giving the video a like and subscribing, and let's keep going with the list. And now let's move from the X-Men into the Avengers, because the game still is lacking a ton of very classic Avengers characters that are the face of the MCU. So whether people like it or not, they're probably gonna make it into the game, and there are classic characters that deserve a spot. So in the male side, I have Thor, Hulk, and Doctor Strange. I think that these three characters make a ton of sense for various reasons. They are very famous. They are the face of Marvel at the moment, with, you know, characters like Iron Man and Captain America. And believe me, they are probably gonna get rebooted and basically be the main characters again in the Avengers. Even if the actors are different, like, they're probably still gonna be the characters that are gonna represent the Marvel brand with the X-Men in the future. and they just make a ton of sense because of that. But they also are great fighting game characters. Like, we've seen Thor, Hulk, and Doctor Strange in many fighting games, and they make it for great fighting game archetypes, and they could just be very interesting characters depending on how ArcSys approach them. So yeah, I think that Hulk, Thor, and Doctor Strange just are kind of like in, you know, even if we haven't seen a trailer for them, they are probably like 100% in the base roster for the game. And then for the female side of the Avengers, I have Scarlet Witch, Black Widow, and Captain Marvel. And these characters are actually not the first, you know, like female faces that I would personally put in the game. Like, if I could change some of these characters for more female X-Men, I would do it. But I do think that they're just staples, you know, of Marvel by this point. And it would be really weird if Scarlet Witch, Captain Marvel, and Black Widow are not in the game. They are the female face of Marvel. So it would be kind of like a super strange and awkward situation if those characters are not in the roster. I think that Scarlet Witch and Captain Marvel have like 100% chance of being in. They're probably already in the game. But with Black Widow, I'm not 100% sure. I think that she is the female face of Marvel. But at the same time, she's a character that is maybe a little harder to design on an interesting way, because she doesn't have like the most insane powers and stuff like that. And ArcSys love their crazy characters. So maybe Black Widow is just gonna be a DLC with someone like Hawkeye, and basically have like a package, you know, of those level of like non-insane powers Avengers. But I think that it is still insanely high chance that Black Widow is gonna be in the game, and that's why I put her in this list, because she's just the female, well, from Marvel, and she's probably gonna be in the base roster. So yeah, that would be it for the female side of the Avengers. And now let's move into the villains, because we all know that Marvel has a ton of iconic, very amazing villains that deserve a spot in a fighting game. But sadly, when you think about it, if you're gonna have a Marvel-based, you know, comic book fighting game, you're probably gonna put more heroes than villains, especially if the roster is gonna be in the smaller side. So I have 3 villains that for me are mandatory. They have to be in the game, and there's no world in which they don't make it in. They just make a ton of sense for this game. And those are Thanos, Venom, and then kind of a fight between Green Goblin and Doc Ock. And well, for Venom and Thanos, what can I even say? Like, both of these characters are incredibly famous, even more popular than a ton of classic Marvel heroes. So I think that they just have to make it into the game because of that popularity level, but also they are great characters for a fighting game. We've seen Venom in many fighting games, and he's amazing for that type of video game. It just makes sense, and Venom is arguably as popular as a Spider-Man by this point. He's probably a top 10, you know, character for Marvel when it comes to popularity. And then for Thanos, Thanos is arguably the most famous or popular Marvel villain ever because of the MCU. You know, all the impact that Thanos had in the movies, at the end of the day, made him a centerpiece for Marvel as a brand overall after, you know, all the Infinity Saga, or whatever way you want to call it. So in that sense, I think that Thanos and Venom are going to be in the game 100%. There's just no world in which these 2 characters don't make it into the base roster. And then we have the discussion for the other, you know, Spider-Man villain, Green Goblin or Dr. Octopus. And for me, they are just so good in terms of gameplay design for a fighting game that I would just love to see them. They have never been on a fighting game before, which is an even stronger argument for them to be in the game, since ArcSys wants to make new characters and not copy just the, you know, Marvel vs. Capcom roster. And I think that both can work. I would personally like to see Dr. Octopus more than Green Goblin, but I know that Green Goblin is arguably more popular, you know, and people like Green Goblin a lot. So with any of these 2, I would be happy. And I think that one of these 2 needs to make it, and if both make it, amazing. But with the roster on the smaller side, you would probably only put one of these into the game. And we finally got to the last 2 picks, and these ones, you know, were kind of like the hardest ones for me to decide, because I have multiple characters in mind fighting for these 2 last couple of picks, but I just had to decide, and one of them is gonna be Black Panther. I think that Black Panther deserves to be in any fighting game or video game that is based on the Marvel IP, because Black Panther is perfect for the video game media, you know? Like, he's the type of character that everybody loves how he looks, the way in which he's gonna play in a video game, either a fighting game or not. And I just think that Black Panther is a very beloved character by anyone that likes Marvel. So I think that BP just has to make it in. Now, I don't know if it's gonna be T'Challa or Shuri. I don't know if it's gonna be, you know, man or female Black Panther, but I will be happy with any of the two as long as the character looks cool and is well executed in terms of gameplay design. So give me any Black Panther, but we need BP in the game. And then for the last spot, you know, the forbidden fight for the last pick was between Daredevil and Blade. And I think that both of these characters deserve to be in the game, like 100% they should be. But I only have one pick left, and I choose Daredevil. I think that Daredevil is just a character that deserves to be in a fighting game at least one time. And why am I choosing Daredevil also? Because he's technically already in a stage in the game. He's kind of like, you know, pseudo leaked as a character, and I would be super happy if Daredevil is in the base roster of the game. I also want Blade, you know, don't get me wrong, but we don't have, you know, the biggest roster maybe, so I think that Daredevil is gonna be in and Blade is gonna be DLC. I think that that's gonna be the situation, and he's gonna be, you know, in a DLC pack with other maybe super cool iconic characters like Deadpool, for example. So yeah, I just think that Daredevil makes it, Blade doesn't. And he just gonna be a great DLC that is gonna make ArcSys a ton of money. So I hope that you enjoyed the video, guys. If you did, of course, leave a like and subscribe to support the channel. And leave a comment with the characters that you want to see that maybe I did not add to the list. You know, you always get people pissed with this type of videos because you cannot put all characters in it. It is the nature of it. But I know that in the comments, I can still hear, you know, people's opinions about what they want to see in the game. And I love to talk with people in the comments. So let me know what you think. Thank you for watching the video. Go ahead and watch another of the videos I'm going to put in the pinned comment if you enjoyed this content, and see you on the next one.